some of your comments
All right, then.
and from there.
I guess I can't call the meeting to order because we don't have a quorum, but we can still have a discussion. Is that correct?
Yeah,
All right, and we're being recorded. So, I was going to propose that before we talk about the feedback on the draft regional plan, that we spend a little bit of time talking about where we think we are in the whole process, legislative changes that are in the way, and maybe having that background will help us have a better basis for discussing the development of the current draft plan.
sure. I can give a quick summary of that, and then Lori can jump in as well. Um, so the narrative of the 2024 plan has been reviewed in its entirety by Kari and Lori against the LURBS checklist, let's call it. And they have identified and lined up each element in that checklist and pointed to the pages in our document where that's addressed. So we're confident, or we're fairly confident, without getting actual LURB feedback, we're fairly confident that what we would be presenting will give them what they need to get us on the road to approval. In terms of legislative changes, there is this clause in S325 that has given folks moments of optimism, then followed by a deep decline of realization that it doesn't actually save us. So there's language about extending all deadlines for municipal and regional plans that expire in 2026 and 2027. But that does not change subsection 4348P, which is where under Act 181, they said every region needs to adopt a plan by December 31st, 2026. So that language is still in there. I've heard some folks say, well, clearly the intention was there. So maybe someone will bring that to our legislature's attention, and that might still get tweaked, and we may get a reprieve through 2027, which I think would be an easy opportunity to continue working, just to cleanly pivot back to the new plan, et cetera. In line with the new plan, most of the heavy lifting is going on around the mapping at this point. Kari and Lori did their heavy lifting. So the most of the work that's being done now is toward really the current plan, but the future plan as well, by filling out the final land use areas in the future land use map, and then how that will cascade into our housing targets. So that is productive work, regardless of which direction we ultimately need to take or get to take. Does that answer some of your questions, Doug?
Yeah. Yep. So
I very briefly skimmed the newest language that Alice sent around. At some point, it doesn't talk about any sort of extension.
It didn't change anything. What she sent out today was the same language I'd read in version 8.1 of.
Oh, it is. Okay.
We were all excited on Friday.
Yeah, there was a moment.
It doesn't work for plans that expire in 2032.
Well, it doesn't really help anybody unless your plan expired in like July of this year. Then you're like, okay, cool. I don't have to do anything until December. But that's really the only case where it would be beneficial as currently written.
Yeah. Okay. So
there's sorry to interrupt, Doug. Just one other thing. I suppose there is potential room for pushback. Again, I just briefly skimmed that language, but it did seem like they changed the definitions of some of the land use classes.
Really?
Like eliminating clauses from the language. I didn't spend enough time with it to know if I think it's substantive, but if they're changing the definitions while they're also reviewing maps, it seems like they're setting themselves up for some problems.
Yeah.
Keep an eye out for historic places, because I heard in some language, historic places might get added back in. And that could seriously change a village area if it has to have a historic place. But I'm sure we'll hear from our colleagues around the state if that happens.
Okay. So should we move on to discussion of the draft regional plan feedback?
Sounds good. Laura, do you here go first, Doug, if you got something, and then I can
was
Laura
gonna
speak to it.
John, I sent in a page or two of comments to Christian that addressed a few of these items here, and I'm wondering if you have got thoughts, or if you'd like to hear my comments, or what would help you, John.
Did you copy me in those? I don't think I've seen that. I'm just back in town a couple days here, so.
No, I didn't. I didn't.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, go for it. I also have language that I've discussed with Christian a while ago when I met with him. Just want to make sure we've had a conversation about it and given it consideration. Has to do with potential regional plan preemption of municipal planning and zoning, and that would not be something that we would consider good policy. So we want language to address that. And I came up with some draft language.
Okay. So my comments talked about I was misunderstanding the interim amended regional plan, thinking that it was going to avoid the two formal public comment periods. But Christian pointed out that indeed those public comment periods are included in this path. So the idea that there might be a question as to whether or not this was a new plan that needed the additional review was solved. It does. For the structure of the plan, it just seems to me there's 8 required elements according to the LURB. Why wouldn't we have 8 chapters that are named what the 8 required elements are and make it simple for everybody? I mean, the LURB seems to be calling the shots here. We have 5 elements already. It wouldn't be that hard to have 8 elements that are exactly the elements that the LURB is looking for. And then I had a few general suggestions of we want to go through and look for the encourage support language and see if any of that wants to be mandatory. There's one place where we're proposing policies in the text, and I don't think we can propose policies. We have to state policies. We have to establish policies. Proposing is too vague. Also, there are places where the CVRPC is used as the subject of a sentence and as a participant in the text of the document, and that's inconsistent. I think we want to see, are we doing that? Aren't we doing that? Let's see. The chapters needed to be organized. I thought that the energy chapter in particular read as a list of things, but there was no coherent presentation to it or plan that tracked through it. Wanted to see a stronger affordable housing section. And just clarification, I thought there was one place where we got lost between the new and the old designators for the designation program categories and the new LURB categories. And just wanted to make sure that was consistent in the housing section. So those were my comments.
So I can speak to the potential breaking out of the policy if you want me to. Oh, sorry, of the elements, making the elements.
Sure.
Just to say that that what was added in are the places where flood resilience is addressed in the text. Mm-hmm. It's been added in where it needs to be, but it's not enough so that it would really be impressive as a standalone element. It would be very thin. So Kari, when she was going through and did her review, she made sure that it was in all the places where it needed to be. Mm-hmm. So some of the places where it shows up are in land use, utilities, facilities, and services, and the economy chapters. But if we were to pull them all out of there and put them into its own element, I'm not sure how well that would work narratively.
Yeah, I guess my feeling is that I've thought from the beginning of this process that affordable housing and flood resiliency were the biggest problems that we were facing, and there should be enough content to create a substantive flood resilience chapter, as the affordable housing section should be strong as well. That's my opinion, and it hasn't necessarily carried the day. But I just don't see why, if we're asked for 8 elements, we don't give them 8 elements. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I understand the work you've done meets the requirement of, yes, this is an element, although it's not named an element. It just seems very strange to me.
Yeah, I think there's general agreement with that line of thinking, Doug. I believe our outline for the new plan does include that. Trying to think how we can look at this without making work that might not go anywhere. Thinking of the flood flood chapter in particular.
I mean, we can go with it and see if we get bounced on it. I mean, that's a strategy.
Well, that's true. The LERB may come back and comment on it or not, and that kind of gives us a pretty clear signal. Especially with the flood resiliency, I think there's a lot of leeway for us to keep working on it over the summer. That's not one of the areas they're paying close attention to. In my conversations with Alex Meinhagen, their primary concerns are the future land use map, the housing targets, and that there's enough space designated to accommodate the housing targets. And finally, the burdens and benefits, EJ review, environmental justice review. Those are sort of where they're putting most of their time and energy into.
Cellars dry out and the memory gets dim.
Mine has, and my cellar flooded twice. And I'm putting books on the floor again. So you're exactly right.
Oh my. Ready for the next clean out.
Brittany just apologized. It's right before her select board meeting, so she won't be making it unless we need her to make a quorum.
Okay, well.
I don't believe we have any activity that requires action today. Do you agree with that, Christian?
I do. Probably. I didn't.
Sorry. There.
So yeah, I think we can, especially the affordable housing. I think there may be more there, as they say. That's probably an area more likely to attract attention by the LERB. So looking at some of the corollary work we've been doing for some of our partners, we might be able to reflect some of that back onto the plan without having to draft a whole bunch of new content, and could have just a little more meat there by a June submission.
Yeah, I mean, I my recollection is there's a subparagraph called affordable housing that's a paragraph long. It seems, and I appreciate that we're doing different things in different locations, but if I'm a select board member or a planning commission member of the town of Waterbury, and I see this draft go by, and that's what's there for affordable housing, I would probably raise my hand and say, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's fair enough. We're not going to be able to explain and message clearly to everyone that this is an interim plan. Yeah. People will see it for what it is, which is the regional plan. It's a good point.
John, what is your point about making sure that the regional plan doesn't impinge on the responsibilities and rights of the municipalities?
I can read your comments, John, if you want. I got them here before me.
Yeah, well, let me kind of just. Okay, go ahead, Christian, and I'll follow up. Yeah, good idea.
There also needs to be clarifying language added to state that projects or project sites, any project, be they housing, energy, industrial development, etc., proposed for development in a municipality must, emphasis, have the support of the municipality wherein they are proposed to be in compliance and compatible with the CVRPC regional plan, regardless of regional significance or impact. where projects not supported or otherwise in alignment with the municipal plan and zoning and are thus disallowed under the regional plan. The CVRPC will not endeavor to otherwise support or advance or advocate, sorry, for such projects in any proceeding, including but not limited to Act 250 and public utility hearings. And feel free to paraphrase and build that out.
Yeah, I guess that's pretty darn close. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I mean, did I put that in writing, or was that verbal and you jotted it down, Christian?
Oh, no. That's from your email. So that would be, those
Good
are,
work, Joe.
Okay. I'm spacing out. Yeah, that hits the nail on the head. I would not want to see basically a Dillon's rule approach applied at the regional level down to our municipalities. And for those who aren't familiar with Dillon's rule, Vermont is a Dillon's rule state, which means we only have the authorities at the municipal level, that the legislature and regional level, that the legislature chooses to grant us. And therefore, they basically tell us what we can and can't do, which is, I see, as hugely undemocratic. But we are a membership organization, and it's supposed to be collaborative and working in concert toward common goals and objectives. And the problem has been in Vermont that developers, be it housing or energy, you pick the category of development, developers come in with their own idea what they think. Well, it's what they want, but then they project their project to us as being what we need. It's a selling point. And then what happens is they then ask for our support, and it has the potential to cause conflict. And we're seeing that with the 181 stuff going on at the legislature at a higher level and broader level application. But in essence, we want to be respectful. And this is what Act 200 anticipated. Vermont had a history of top down. AOT, for instance, used to just ram highway projects through towns against their wishes. Believe it or not, the town of Bolton, the village of Bolton, is actually under the interstate. If you're wondering why that doesn't have a village, it's under the interstate because the state decided they're going to run a highway through, and Bolton had no say over it. So under the Coonan administration in the 80s, they developed, and with the legislature, a law called Act 200, which has been, like Act 250, parts and pieces have been removed from it, so it doesn't reflect its original intent anymore. I don't even know if it exists. At least in part, it still does in statute. But the idea was that enough of the top down. Let's use the grassroots process. Let's grow our planning process from the grassroots, from the municipal level, and the municipal level planning will inform the regional level, and that they should work together, and neighboring towns should work collaboratively, and where there are conflicts between their planning goals, they're supposed to meet them out either between themselves or at the regional planning commission level. And I would like to see us continue that approach. It's been very successful. It's mitigated and minimized conflict, and it kind of has reared its ugly head with the Montpelier thing. We're seeing conflict right now with that. I'm beating the dead horse, but it's not dead. It's alive, and unfortunately too well, with that traffic intersection. And we're supposed to ensure that no municipality steps on another municipality's interests or a region's interests for their own self-interests. And we need to continue that collaborative approach and not have a top-down imposition of policy from the regional level. There is a potential for that under this new existing law 181 for regional plans to do that, and we're not required to do that, but seems to be, you can interpret it to allow for that, and I don't want to see us go that path.
Yeah. Just want to respond to the comment in two parts. One, under the energy chapter, which we have been talking about the day you shared this email with Sam and I, Sam's really baked in a lot of deference to the municipalities and has integrated those constraints into the regional energy plan where they exceed the state constraints or the regional constraints. So essentially expanding our plan to formally recognize local planning. But that's somewhat limited just to that energy chapter. So thinking about the wider project, I think in the land use chapter, we could add some language or potentially a policy that speaks to this. I think we want to be careful because there are going to be times when, say, there might be a protected resource that we would advocate for protecting, regardless of what the municipality believes should happen at that location. But I think something in there where stating that as a matter of policy, the Regional Planning Commission defers to local planning goals for new development or proposed high density housing or industrially. Well, we can find some more generic language, but I think we can incorporate that into the land use.
My this is only my position, not the committee's position necessarily. It was more to do with where a project is proposed in any municipality or municipalities, member municipalities. It could cross municipal boundaries. That where a project is objected to or found to be inconsistent under the municipal plan and or zoning, that the Regional Planning Commission would not, where something has regional impacts. That's something we look at in a project review committee reviews. Regional impacts can be both positive and negative. We tend to think of impacts as negative. You can have positive impacts. And if an example might be a developer comes in and our regional plan goal is that we need more housing. And so a developer comes in and says, these 3 farms in Cabot, I've got options on them, and I want to build a 200 lot subdivision on those farms. And Cabot might say, no, that doesn't align with our planning objectives and nor our zoning. And the developer says, well, or their attorney said, well, we disagree and we're going to take them to court. I would not want to see our regional plan be used in any way or be written so that it could be interpreted in a manner where that developer's attorney could use that as a stick to force that project through over the objections of the impacted municipality or municipalities. So we got to be very clear. Again, I always say our plan is supposed to be provide a benefit to our municipalities and help us grow in a manner that we have shaped collectively, and it should not be used as a bludgeon by developers of any style development against our municipalities. So we got to make sure that language is written tight. Shalls and musts, directive language are important. And I think that if there were just in the introductory, maybe in the very beginning of the plan, in the introduction, we have a catch-all kind of overarching policy statement that this should not be used in a manner that allows for projects of a regional nature with regional impacts to be imposed upon any member municipality.
Yeah.
So not necessarily in land use, Christian, but anywhere. This
I like that idea of
overarching policy statement.
And Doug, is our other commissioner in the room? How's that?
Yeah, I agree with that. John, I support that.
Okay.
So
I think I'm taking a little bit to get up to speed here because I feel like some of what you're proposing, John, is unworkable. Maybe that's just me going to the automatic far extreme. So just in terms of a question, you've reviewed multiple chapters now worth of, for the new plan, not the whatever this plan is, but for the new plan, you've read those goals, policy, or goal strategies and policies. Are those in line with your thinking, or are those problematic in the way that you're describing your end goal for the plan currently?
You know, off the top of my head, Brian, as if I don't have a photographic memory, and it's a flagging memory at 67 years of age. I will tell you that. But no, I mean, I generally support those objectives, but they can be interpreted in different ways. So, for instance, like I said, the housing thing, we all want more housing, and we want affordable housing. By the way, we've said that over time and again. I don't think there's anything in our plan that gets us there, and I don't think there's anything at the state level that really gets us there on the grander scale in the larger scheme of things. There's anecdotal examples where Kathy Byers, Vermont, whatever that nonprofit is, they've got a couple projects around the state, but that's not going to resolve the stated problem, which now it's starting to be called into question anyway. But the overall arching goals are good. But then for a developer to come in and say, I'm building what I deem to be affordable, and we defined affordable, Brian, even, what is affordable?
We do
might
that.
have. We do that. Yeah. Okay. But for a developer to say my 200 lot subdivision in the town of Cabot, my example made up, has regional implication. It's going to resolve 60% of your housing needs. So I want consistent with the regional plan, you need to the regional plan and the regional planning commission needs to support this project, despite the town of Cabot saying no. We didn't plan for that area to have this scale of development. It's not zoned for that, and our plan doesn't allow for that. Now, and so there's at least from the developer's perspective, a conflict, and we need to ensure that, to the extent there's interpretation, that the regional planning commission say, well, too bad, so sad, Cabot. We need this housing, and it's coming to your town, and we're happy that developer stepped up from Houston, Texas, and that's going to meet an important portion of the need, and so we're going to fight you at Act 250. I would hope that would never come to pass, and so we need to ensure
John, if the local zoning board does not grant a permit, the regional planning commission never gets involved, do they?
So if you had an Act 250
at Act 250, you do. Go ahead, Christian.
You go ahead, Josh. You're a commissioner.
Well, at Act 250, permits preside what they call a presumption of compliance. They're actually not required to move forward through the Act 250 process. A developer has the right to request the commission, the District Environmental Commission, to move project review forward, despite either not holding a local zoning permit where one is required, or being denied a local zoning permit. And the developer would then, the burden would be on the developer to rebut the presumption that this does not comply, their project does not comply with zoning or the planning. It's called a rebuttable presumption. If you have your zoning permit, and that zoning permit is also backed up by the local plan, that provides a presumption of compliance with the local zoning and plan, and the District Environmental Commission can rely on that permit. Now, neighbors, adjoiners, parties can still object if they think that the zoning administrator didn't follow the rules. They can present their case that permit was ill-gotten, was wrongly issued. But where a permit is not issued or has yet to be issued, a developer has the right under Act 250, and historically, since the beginning of that law, to move forward, and if they want to put on a case to argue that they, despite the findings of the town, or A&R, for instance, do comply with the standards under or they do meet the criterion that those permits fall under, or the criteria those permits fall under. So, does that answer your question? I don't know, Brian.
I just got to follow up on that, Brian, because I think there is a point there, right? The regional plan is not regulatory, and nothing that we do supersedes local zoning. But I can see we want to be in alignment with our municipalities in those cases.
It actually is regulatory, Christian. I'm going to disagree. Under Criterion 10 and the case law associated with Criterion 10 since 1995, when John Ewing was chair of the Environmental Board, I think it was a wrong decision, but it's been the law of the land 31 years, I think, that regional plan can have regulatory effect where written properly, or written with directive language. We've had this conversation multiple of times at this.
So, yeah, so it does have some regulatory authority. I'll certainly not argue that point, but it doesn't supersede local zoning. So there still is a lot of authority still left in the municipality. However, I think given the political environment at this time being clear that we are in alignment with our municipalities, even though we're still going to have things like our conservation land uses where we're prioritizing conservation uses over development uses and would state so in an Act 250 review. For the sake of the development itself, I think it might be a wise move to make. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I still have concerns about how this would play out if, for example, the zoning bylaws were written by one version of the zoning board, and then there's 100% turnover, and the new board wants to interpret their existing regulations in a way that's different than it was originally drafted. That could put us at odds with the town, where we're saying, we don't agree with your interpretation. When we helped you write these zoning bylaws, this was the conversation that surrounded it. This is the reason why that was passed. So, I mean, for one, I think that there is a potential issue with, turnover in a zoning board, turnover on a select board. And while I certainly appreciate what your point here, John, and I don't totally disagree with it, I don't also know how we carve out environmental decisions, because if we're trying to do environmental planning at the municipal level, we are automatically going to fail. Environmental decisions need to be made at the regional scale, or at least at the watershed scale, so that we actually move our way towards resilience.
I'm thinking more of a no decision, where the regional plan would be used to force a yes where there's a no. So if a town says no, and we should be looking at the clear language of the zoning, at some point, if it's interpretive, I don't disagree with you, Brian, if there's some kind of an abuse, really. But if the language is clear on its face that we should not be challenging that zoning in order to impose, I think, development where it shouldn't be. And I agree. I mean, a state A&R, I don't think they preempt. They actually have a separate authorities, and to the extent there are environmental protections that are in place under our plan, then those local plans and local zoning should be drafted in keeping with those protections. And I agree with that. I'm speaking more where a developer, we can have a turnover on this commission and in your office, Brian, where, and I'm just going to say there are regional planning commissions, at least one in this state, that is very pro-development, and their executive director can't say enough uh, cannot articulate enough bad language against Act 250. Act 250 really does protect our smaller municipalities. Maybe Chittenden County sees it as getting in the way of what their objectives are. But when you get a big developer coming to town, one of the important pieces of Act 250 that seems to be lost on so many people, including the people who object to 181, they seem to be. I understand their concerns with the tier 3, but they seem to be losing sight of the benefits of Act 250 when a big developer comes in with, Downs, Racklin, and Martin as their legal team, high-powered legal team, and they're going to take a little municipality like mine to court. There's $100,000 bill right there just to defend our zoning. And Act 250, they have attorneys on staff. They have the attorneys, the assistant AGs, basically assisting them on staff, and so we have this kind of bastion of legal resources that is made available to municipalities at no cost, where Act 250 applies. And if there's no Act 250, it's all up to the town to defend themselves, and most towns will buckle under because they can't afford it.
Yeah.
So I have one last question. I promise I'll stop, although my head's really spinning about how to make this work and have the regional plan still to be something. But prior to my time here at the commission as an employee, I was on the Waitsfield Planning Commission, and the town of Facein, directly next door to us, put out a permit notification for a cell tower within 100 feet of the town line. Facein approved it. Waitsfield objected to it. What does CVRPC do in a case like that? Because the Waitsfield town plan is very clear, like, no, and the Facein town plan was, So, like, if CVRPC got dragged into that, how do we mitigate that type of scenario where one town is for it and another town is against it?
That is a very good example of, and I guess I got to think that one through. I don't disagree. That's a complex situation.
I mean, it's worse, John, because the visual impact is for the most part not observed in Facein. It's almost exclusively in Waitsfield because of where it's situated. It's on that hill, if you know Waitsfield at all, up behind the local folks smokehouse.
Yeah. So that's
property owners, an attorney, yeah.
So that's a regional impact, and
that's right.
It's a regional impact which the Regional Planning Commission could weigh in opposition. What John seems to be talking about mostly is when a municipality says, no, we don't want that, and the developer tries to use the regional plan as a tool to force something to a municipality that they don't want to do, which is something I support. And to me, there's a place for this. We have a statement of policies to guide future growth, one-page portion of the opening chapter. That's an overarching philosophical approach to how we want the regional plan to work. That's the place to find the language that accomplishes the step of, if a municipality rejects it, the regional plan can't be used as a tool against the municipality.
Exactly, and that's exactly right, Doug. If a town wants to propose something and it impacts its neighbor, that's when we should engage and say, whoa, you guys have an obligation to play nice in the region. That's the Montpelier example too. Yeah. And I agree that it's a concern, and that it should be addressed by the CVRPC. And to the extent that is in conflict with kind of our regional planning objectives, then we should engage against that proposal. I really have a problem with developers driving our planning, just overall, that we should be driving it. and it shouldn't be driven by the threat of litigation and the associated cost of litigation.
So this might be naive, but isn't this the point of the future land use map? To work with towns to identify where they want development to be? I mean, it's not going to work so much for utility siting, but in terms of development, if something is, that's why we're making the tier 1A and tier 1B, which requires opting in, so that won't be imposed on them. And if they've identified that they want their village to stay looking like a village, and that's been what's the future land use area has been set up as, it seems as though that's going to provide some protection to this idea of developers pushing through, but maybe that's naive.
No, that's exactly right. And it does apply to utility siting. The regional plan, the criteria of Act 250 are part of Section 248 of Title 30, which is the body of law that the Public Utility Commission governs utility project review under, and criterion 10's there, and we can and should participate in that process where it has regional implications upon our and negative implications, particularly upon our member municipalities. That's exactly right. But it's imperative for it to have any real effect to say it would be nice, or it should, or we could. The Public Utility Commission has made clear, don't waste your time. We're not looking at language like that, as has the Act 250 Environmental Board. It keeps changing its name. It's got to be, the language needs to be directive. So in the case of Waitsfield, the Waitsfield's plan says this area is historic in nature and shall not be impacted by projects, shall or must not be impacted by projects that are inconsistent with the historic nature of this area, or the however the language would be worded. But if Waitsfield doesn't have directive language, they're going to have a hard time arguing against, for instance, this cell tower in Facein. Yeah. There's also a telecom plan that there's an area law that recognizes that municipalities, if they have a telecommunications ordinance, they have to adopt it, and it's got to be clear, again, with directive language. And if a municipality does that, it gives them greater say at the Public Utility Commission when these projects come forward. Do you guys have that, Brian, in Waitsfield, a telecommunication ordinance?
I don't think so, but it's been a while since I've looked at our zoning bylaws. I'm not sure.
It would be separate and standalone. You might, if you don't, you might want to have a chat with your folks about getting that in place. The actually League of Cities and Towns got that piece of law through a number of years ago.
Brian, are you getting your head around the idea of finding a way to get the gist of this discussion into this draft of the municipal plan?
I mean, I think we can give it a shot. I'm still concerned practically how that would flush out. I'll probably think of a few more examples and maybe we can talk through them. But I mean, I definitely am on board with the sentiment, right? Generally, we don't want to go contrary from a yes to a no or a no to a yes. I don't think it's unidirectional there. But practically speaking, without neutering a substantial amount of the language in the regional plan, I'm concerned that we don't accomplish what John is suggesting here.
Yeah, I think it'll be tricky. We're gonna have to. I'd like to play around with some language and come back to you all.
Okay. Again, you may want to talk to Peter Gregory, because I believe they've done that in their plan. Why reinvent the wheel?
Absolutely.
And they've used their plan to great effect to prevent these kinds of projects from happening.
Okay, so Do we have anything else that we want to talk about in terms of the review of the draft regional plan, or do we want to move on to the regional future land use map?
I just want to close it really quickly, Doug, by saying we'll take these comments and this discussion to the board next week and tell them sort of, how the plan is being iterated through the regional plan committee. And then coming out of the commission next Tuesday, we will essentially reset the plan to all regular text, and only the new items that essentially we've talked about tonight and we talk about next Tuesday will be added in as read. So it'll be the next iteration in the plan, so folks can just focus on the changes rather than.
Can you please repeat how you're treating the red line process there? I didn't follow that.
Okay. So the current draft, which is strike through, comments, and red text, will continue to live on our website, dated whatever day it was put up. A new draft will be added to our website, which will be the second iteration, where by removing the comments, removing the red text, removing the strike through text, or rather changing the font of the red text to be black instead of red. And then only new material that came in that second iteration would then come in as highlighted red.
So we're going to accept all changes of the draft, clear the comments, and treat that as the basis for a new red line process going forward.
That was a much more concise way to put it.
Okay, thank you. Comments on the regional future land use map, Brian? What would you like to put forward?
Yeah, I just want to give folks an update. At this point, I think that I'm done with all of the identifying all the tier 1 eligible areas, and have begun, more than begun, working on the rural, the 3 different rural classes at this point. So if there are any tier 1 eligible areas that either of you want to take a look at, I'm happy to do that at this time. If you have other questions about what's going on with the map, I'm happy to answer those. I can show other examples if you've got questions about things. However you want this to work.
I mean, I feel as though I understand what the process is and how you're implementing it. And it's a question of moving through that. John, do you have anything in particular that you'd like to see?
No, I'm happy with this interim approach, so generally so.
How big is the pile that you got left to do, Brian?
It's still pretty big, but it's mostly the rural areas, which goes a lot faster. The really honing in on the boundaries for the tier 1 eligible areas is what took a very substantial amount of time, where I was looking at zoning bylaws, municipal future land use map, town plan, any other planning documents, and then that's summary of characteristics of the parcels. So that really took a long time, because you're really kind of digging into the past, present, and future of every parcel, at least from a municipal perspective. The 3 rural categories, the rural general, rural ag and forestry, and rural conservation, go a whole lot faster for a couple reasons. One, the parcels are huge, so we're looking at parcels that are at least 25 acres, but a lot of the parcels and along our ridge lines are substantially larger than that. So just crunching through certainly the conservation and ag forestry parcels is going pretty quickly, and then the last part to round that out is really deciding, should a parcel go into rural general or rural ag and forestry, and that's really based on a look at the land cover, that data set that UVM created, as well as the last year's aerial imagery, to get a sense of whether or not there are at least 20-acre blocks on a parcel. So suppose a parcel's 25 acres. If the homeowner built their, or property owner built their their house and barn, etc., really close to the road, then the back 20 acres is intact as either cropland or hayland or a forest, then it would we would put that particular parcel into that rural ag and forestry. But if it's the same exact parcel and the same building footprint, but the property owner builds it, halfway between the front and back of the property, meaning there's no longer a viable either hayfield or forest plot, then it goes into the rural general. So, that's kind of the level of decision making that we're engaging.
How do you how do you resolve if a parcel meets two criteria? It's an ag property that's conserved.
I'm sorry, I don't think I understand your question, Doug.
Isn't it possible that a parcel could be agricultural parcel or woodland parcel and also be conserved? So it could be categorized as a conserved property or as a agricultural property.
Yeah, in that case, I'm deferring to the conserved.
Okay.
So my understanding is and Brian, I think you know this better than me, so I'm kind of a question too. My memory is that for a piece of forest land, and if you have a house on the property, you need 27 acres because they hold out 2 acres for the homestead. But for ag land, I think you can have 10 acres and be in the current use program. Am I correct on that? I'm pretty sure.
I don't know.
I'm not sure if that's something that's changed over time, John. There are certainly parcels that are smaller than, well, so first of all, you can have a 25-acre parcel with no structure and enroll that in the current use program. But as you said, 27 acres, 2 acre holdout, the other 25 go in. But there are definitely parcels that are smaller than 25 acres. And I'm not sure if those are legacy or if they were part of a larger parcel that was then subdivided and someone paid to take a portion of it out of the current use program. So I'm not totally sure about that. The VAPTA methodology instructed us to look for 20-acre minimum lots for forest land and hay fields for properties that are not in current use if we want to put them in that rural ag and forestry, because the thinking there, at least my understanding of the thinking there, is that's a size that's large enough to still manage it as a working land versus a bunch of long skinny parcels where there might be 10 acres of woodland on the side, but there's not even really room for a forest road, or unless you count on 4 or 5 neighbors coming together and having a shared management plan, it's not going to be a viable forestry operation. So for those smaller ones, we just push those into the rural general, even though under an exceptional set of circumstances, like you and all your neighbors really get along and have decided you want to go in on this forest management plan together. We're not trying to capture that level of detail. It'd be nice, but again, that's a transient property at best. As soon as the landowner that was the glue that held everyone together sells their property, the whole thing falls apart, and it really should have just been rural general all along from our future land use mapping perspective. I'm trying, certainly where it makes sense, again, sort of deferring any of the conserved land. So even if it's conserved and in the current use program, deferring to the conservation status of the land. If it's in current use and not conserved and falls outside of a tier 1 area, then it's going right into that rural ag and forestry. And to me, the bigger challenge, or the biggest challenge there really is, when does it become rural general, and when does it still make sense to try to keep it into that rural ag and forestry? And that, I won't say that I'm evaluating it differently from town to town, but I would expect to get feedback that varies from town to town, because some towns really lean pretty heavily into the working landscape aspect of their municipality, certainly in their town plan. whereas others make passing mention of the working landscape, but and not that they're super pro development, but the working landscape's maybe not their North Star for the future of their community. So I would expect to get feedback that says, hey, you've got this as rural general. We think it fits better under rural ag and forestry, and then vice versa. I feel a little bit more confident in terms of the way that the rural conservation has been laid out, because it's relatively cut and dried criteria around wetlands over 5 acres, and the list goes on from there. The other thing I'll say, and then Christian has his hand raised, was in a past conversation with the regional plan committee this was sort of early on, and I was asking about the approach that you all were looking for. It did seem to focus more heavily on the rural ag and forestry and rural conservation where those fit, and not trying to shoehorn things into the rural general or some other class, just based on sort of regional preference.
Okay.
I'm going to add a little texture to this conversation in terms of some, I wouldn't say unintentional outcomes, but some maybe unexpected outcomes as we move forward with the housing targets. Just as a quick reminder, a majority of our housing target needs to be assigned to the Tier 1 eligible areas, which Brian's got a good handle on now. But then that leaves, let's say put 60% in that first pot, that leaves 40% for the second pot. Currently, I'm saying, all right, well, we'll treat the transition areas, the hamlet areas, the rural general and rural ag essentially as viable locations for residential development, and have and prescribe no new development in rural conservation and rural enterprise. That doesn't mean you can't build a house in either of those zones. It's just in terms of the way we're planning, we're acknowledging that those aren't going to be the big levers to work towards our housing goals by developing in a conservation area or a enterprise area. There's no reason that rural forestry ag should be counted in the same way as rural general and hamlet. But especially once the maps are finalized, it'll be interesting to see if we include it or exclude it, how that might lead to some funny outcomes in where we are saying new housing should be prioritized region wide. So there are some flow down effects of how these choices are made at the micro level on our macro discussion.
Yeah.
Just a point. It's kind of off on a tangent, but I'm forgetting the woman's name, but she put together a bunch of data recently, and I can get it to you, her article on the actual growth in Vermont over the since COVID. And our growth is actually, I think it's like 0.1%. It's not 3 or 5 or wherever the legislature was convinced is the direction we're heading. That we don't have negative growth. It's basically flat. I think over the last year we had 200 people come into the state. Like we're losing as many as we're gaining. Basically, we're flat right now in terms of growth. So all this work we're doing is based on projections that were just that, projections, and the data does not support those projections now. There was a spike during COVID that got everybody alarmed, and there's actually negative growth in many states. Actually, Maine and New Hampshire are the two New England states that are seeing positive growth. Maine and Massachusetts, I'm sorry. New Hampshire's seen a decline. New York State, upstate New York, has seen a decline. Vermont is flat. So just FYI, we're chasing something that may not be based on reality, but whatever. I guess we're prepared in the event we do see a spurt.
No disagreement with that reading of the data from my end. I'm just reading the statute and making sure our towns get all the incentives available to them.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, to that end, I'm, when I was working on the tier one eligible areas, there's the long-standing conflict of existing downtowns and village centers in floodplains. They're largely already built out. There is some room for infill development. I'm not going to lie, it's a bit painful to be preparing a future land use map and pretending like it's okay for more development in these already extremely fragile places. But again, following the methodology and the statute, um, making those, I mean, they're not exceptions. It's there. In other places where it's possible and even desired for us to expand the tier one eligible areas into adjacent green fields, where there is also a river corridor, for example. I've very intentionally drawn the tier one eligible areas outside of the river corridor. So I'll try to say this again in a more simple way. If there's already development there and the area is eligible for tier one, I'm worried less about the river corridor from a mapping perspective than I am if there's not development and an area is eligible for a tier one designation where we should really endeavor to keep new development out of harm's way. And the only way that I can see us getting to that place is to not include those areas in the tier one eligible areas so that no development exemptions would be granted to them. If people want to develop there, they should go through the full regulatory process and make sure that the development that is there will last and that it's not going to impact the downstream neighbors.
Yeah. So
Perfect. Perfect.
Separate question. I understand that housing targets need the future land use maps to be completed. Does the fact that the tier 1A and 1B boundaries are now defined allow us to tell towns anything that helps them with their planning process, or do we have to wait until this is an all-at-once release?
Let Brian and I talk about that tomorrow, because if we could, like I said, lop out conservation, because that's got easements on it, we might be able to get a pretty good estimate.
My question is coming from my local planning board and local select board saying, hey,
Yeah.
when am we get our housing targets?
Yeah, I'd love to be able to give the board that going into the next meeting so they time to mull it over.
I mean, at a minimum, I think we could identify that 60%. That's the 60% number.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So we've got the tier one
Yeah.
boundaries. And then I know I'm not going to be all the way done, so I'm not even going to suggest we deal with the 40%. Personally, I think if we dealt with the 60% targets for the tier one eligible areas for our municipalities, and then we can say you've still got this other 40% and specify what that number is distributed throughout the rest of the area. Again, just for simplicity's sake, we don't necessarily need to put in the very immediate term, don't, in my mind, need to put a target on the rural general and the rural ag and forestry. We don't need to break out that number. We know the gross number that would be required for the rest of the municipality outside the tier one area.
John.
I think the answer is no, but should we consider creating mapping zones for appropriate, like certain categories of development, which should be limited size or scope or location? I'm thinking of data centers. I mean, they have massive impact on our grid, and should our plan speak to that, and should the planning maps speak to that? You know, where would they most likely locate? What type of power infrastructure would they normally seek out? If there's no power infrastructure, if they're going to be self-generating, where would we not want to see them self-generating, i.e., having massive gas turbine emissions? That's what they seem to be heading toward to avoid dealing with the approval process with, state by state public utility commissions. Do we want to address that? I mean, it's a national issue, and state by state they're going after that. I think we have the authority to do that. Do we want to?
Has the governor taken a position on data centers? I can't remember.
Beats me. Beats me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sam recently spoke to this in a conversation with me. I'm not sure if it was energy related, but that might be useful information that she was talking about some regulatory ways to limit or influence where that development could go. But I can't for the life of me tell you a synopsis of what that content was.
yeah, I would say substantial regional impact definition would be the
Yeah.
we have square feet in that definition. If we don't, we should make sure this draft does, because just as we'd like to review a Berlin Mall, we'd like to review a Amazon shipping center, we'd like to review a data center. There's
Well,
weird
substantial
basic
regional
spaces.
impact. We keep thinking about the land use footprint, but there's the airspace above it. There's the emissions. There are the grid impacts in addition to the emissions. I mean, they seem to go one way or the other. If the grid is robust enough, they try to connect to the grid. If they see that there are headwinds for one reason or another, they start looking at on-site generation with these gas turbines. I know that's what Mr. Musk has been doing around the country, as is Meta. And then there is the groundwater resource, the substantial impact. What they do is they cycle groundwater through cooling coils, and they're supposed to be isolating the groundwater from the coolant, but there seems to be at site after site, they're finding these coolant chemicals in the groundwater, and a number of them have contained PFAS. So they're taking and they're going in rural areas, the most rural areas in many of these states that they're being located. So just FYI, we might want to look at regional implications to groundwater, surface water, air emissions, grid, in addition to the land use implications.
I think that wants to definitely be looked at in the next version of the regional plan. We'll have time to do that research and know more, and put that on our to-do list.
Noted.
Yeah, I think we might be able to. Well, let us look. There might be some simple language we can steal from another region.
Yep.
But we'll at least make sure the threshold in our substantial regional impact would give us a chance to have standing. Should that happen?
Yep.
I'm a full supporter of plagiarism in this regard, Kristen.
I hate new wheels. I love old wheels.
That's my favorite expression. It really is.
So, do we have anything else on regional future land use that we want to talk about today?
I don't, unless you have other questions that you want me to address.
No. I mean, let's just agree. Is the next meeting 2 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now? Do you know where we?
It's currently 4. I don't know. Do you guys have an intermediate meeting scheduled?
We don't have one scheduled, but if you think there's a reason to have one, we certainly
I don't think there is one unless you guys need it for the committee to support you.
Yeah, no, we'll be taking everything back to you. First draft land use map, first draft targets, first draft plan, with any changes between now and then, at your June meeting, where we'd hope you guys would be. Hey, mainland China is calling me.
Give them my number.
Luckily not Hong Kong.
Not Hong Kong. Definitely not Taiwan.
Sorry.
They want to make our
Not
future
my-
land use map. Answer that call.
They'll do it cheaper.
We know they're going to be pro-development.
So yeah, no, you'll get another chance in June where that's where we'd be looking for an endorsement of the first draft that we'd be submitting to the Land Use Review Board for their comments.
So do you envision the next draft of the interim regional plan to be produced once you have comments from all the Board of Commissioners and reissue a draft, or do you wait to get the LURB comments?
We will, like I was saying earlier, describing that iteration process, we will iterate following next Tuesday's meeting of the Board of Commissioners. We'll get any comments we collect that night, add them to the comments we've discussed tonight,
Yep.
and then bring that all back to you in June.
Okay, and then that's what goes to the LURB.
And that's what
Yeah.
you'll have the right to make some changes then
Yep.
in June before it goes back to the board.
Okay.
Basically, that's what goes to the board.
Okay.
LURB.
LURB. So we didn't convene a meeting. We don't have to vote to get out of the meeting. Are we done?
Not that I know it. We all agreed. Otherwise, we can stay here all night.
Okay.
I think we should thank the staff for working their tails off on this. Brian, thank you. I like the way you think. Thank you.
It's not
Thank
just
you,
me,
Brian.
John. I appreciate the comment. Yeah.
Well, maybe
Yeah.
I don't. Maybe you're the only one. I like the way they think. How do you phrase it?
That makes me nervous on a personal level. So let's move on from that, John.
All right.
Okay, let's get the heck out of Dodge.
All right. Take care, all. Thank you.
All right,
Thanks,
see
guys.
y'all.
Thank you.
Fine.
Night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, that was fun.
It's time.